Hello, everybody. My name is Chelan Wilkins, and I'm a registered holistic nutritionist. I'm also working with the brand Harmony, and I'm so excited to be on Nature's Fair's Facebook Live with you guys tonight because we're going to be talking about some of my favorite stuff. We're going to be talking about hormones, and that's one of my favorite topics to talk about. And so if you've never joined in on a Facebook Live before, or if this is what you've been doing for the last few months as everybody's kind of gone online and on screen and done some webinars or watched some Instagram Lives or even the Facebook, it's really a great way to, gain some great education, but it's also a great way to put your questions out there. So if you guys have some questions about hormones or things that are going on in your body or anything that I'm talking about tonight, please just go into that chat box. Please put those questions in there because I am here to answer those for you guys. Anything we talk about tonight is definitely, if you have questions about it. Plus, I'm also going to talk to you guys about a few different products that I love and lead us into the next, because this is a 4-part women's health series. So tonight and the next 3 Wednesdays ahead, we have lots of great information for all of you guys, and I'm so excited. So another great thing before we kind of get into all of this fun info is that I'm going to be giving away a free product to some a lucky viewer tonight. And how you can win, so it's either going to be one of our balance products or one of our menopause products. So you get to choose, and how you get a chance to win a free product is just to put your comments in there and type and let us add if you have a question or comments on the things that we're talking about. You can also send likes and hearts. So a person who does that throughout the evening is going to get entered into a chance to win a free product, and we will announce that winner tonight. So we'll choose it. So let's get started. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself before we dive into hormones. So for those of you guys who are just joining in, my name is Chelan Wilkins. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist. I'm actually Vancouver based, but my hometown is actually Vernon. So I always like to say that. I was born and raised in Vernon. And so I'm here in rainy Vancouver right now. I've been a holistic nutritionist for probably over 5 years now, and I had my own practice for the first 2 years, and I specialized in digestive health and women's hormones, as well as adrenal fatigue, which we're going to touch a little bit on tonight, because I think during this time, a lot of us might need, might have some information about this stress, and I feel like we could use a little bit of education around that as well. And so I spent 2 years doing my own practice, and then now in the last 3 years, I have spent my time educating consumers and retailers like you guys across Canada about overall health and how we can look after ourselves through holistic health and supplements and the right lifestyle and nutrition choices. So I love what I do, and I'm really happy to be here. So I see a couple of you guys have signed in. So yes, if you want to grab a notebook and take some notes, that would be awesome. Or just sit back and enjoy your evening and listen along. So first off, I want to talk about, when I talk about our hormones, I know a lot of us, especially if this can be for men and women as well. So I don't want to just say, when we're talking about hormones, it's just for women, because hopefully, there might be some men watching us tonight. One of the hormones that I want to start off with is cortisol. And the reason I talk about cortisol so much when I'm talking about our hormones is because cortisol is our stress hormone. And right now, more than ever, we're probably feeling a little bit more effects of the stress, right? So especially the last 2 months, I can't believe it's already been 2 months, we've been under a state of stress. And we have 2 different types of stress that we go through in our body. We can have acute stress, and we can have something like chronic stress. And chronic stress is the kind of stress that we take on a day-to-day basis. So we have, if we are working, if you're like me, I work full-time from home. I'm also a full-time stay-at-home parent. And I've also become a grade 5 and grade 7 teacher. So it's been a lot, right? So that's kind of chronic stress, the day-to-day stuff that we take on every day. So our body is built to adapt to stress, and that's what cortisol does. So cortisol is our stress hormone. So when we are under states of stress, like chronic or acute stress, which is something that's traumatic in our lives, we pump out cortisol. So we need cortisol, but we don't need to be under a constant state of stress where we're pumping out so much cortisol. And what happens when we are pumping out a lot of cortisol, we start to feel the effects of that. So how many of you guys, you can just send a little message in that chat box. I'm going to get you guys chatting tonight. How many of you guys know of something called adrenal fatigue? Or have you guys heard of burnout syndrome? So burnout syndrome is actually just recognized by the World Health Organization a year ago for stress in the workplace. So it actually was recognized. So when we are under a lot of stress and we have a lot of cortisol, we have things that can affect us on a day-to-day basis. So I see one of the comments here is that, if we have a lot of cortisol, can we be at risk for lots of anxiety? Is that one of the symptoms? And absolutely. So a good idea of how we can feel cortisol, especially when we, if we're under stress, but when you're trying to go to sleep at night and you look at the clock and you have to get up early in the morning, and then all of a sudden, you look at the clock and you're like, I have to be up in 4 hours and 32 minutes, and then your heart starts racing. That's adrenaline, and that's from our adrenal glands. So our adrenal glands sit on top of our kidneys. They release that cortisol, and we release that adrenaline. So the purpose of, the cortisol, our anti-stress hormones, and like adrenaline, is to protect our body, right? It's, if we were to run away from a tiger or a bear, we're going to have all the adrenaline, we're going to go. It's this same kind of thing when we're under a lot of stress. So anxiety definitely can be a symptom of when we're under a lot of stress, and sleep disturbances and things like that. So if you are under a lot of stress and you have a lot of cortisol, that you're pumping out a lot of cortisol, you will find that you have anxiety, you might have some depression, you might have a loss of libido, you could have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. You definitely you can have some abdominal weight gain, and inability to cope. You might have some other hormonal imbalances, which we'll talk about throughout this Facebook Live today, about how stress affects our other hormones. You can even have like mood swings, irritability, kind of all the things you might be noticing that you're having right now. Like things are setting you off, or you're a little bit more, short with things. And you might also even be noticing, extreme fatigue. So a lot of the times when you're under a lot of adrenal fatigue, you feel really tired all the time. So you wake up in the morning, you're not rested, you need a lot more coffee, you get a 3 o'clock in the afternoon crash. So how many of us out there, 3 o'clock hits, we're like, I need another coffee, or you're craving something really sweet, you want to eat some sugar to get some energy. That shows that we're having, cortisol imbalances, because we have a cortisol curve. So we should wake up in the morning, we should have lots of cortisol because we've had a great sleep. And then what ends up happening is that if we are pumping out too much cortisol, we're under a lot of stress, we're not waking up rested, we're not sleeping, and melatonin's our sleep hormone, which is actually on, a teeter-totter with our cortisol. So what ends up happening is that our melatonin's not being released when it should be to go to sleep, and everything's off balance. So one thing I want you guys all to take from this tonight is when we're talking about hormones, and if you join me for the next 4 series, because we're going to dive into so many different things about hormones and our overall health. But one thing I want you guys to all remember is that our body likes to be in something called homeostasis. Our body likes to be in balance. So if one hormone is out, they're all out, right? So when it comes to our nutrition, our lifestyles, our work life, our relationships, everything, I always say everything needs to be in balance. So when we're under a lot of stress and we're pumping a lot of that cortisol, it's going to affect our other hormones. So another thing when we're talking about cortisol and we're talking about our hormones, and I'll make sure that I answer a lot of these questions. I've got so many great questions on here, so don't worry, I will get to them. As that when we are producing a ton of cortisol, that can affect our other hormones like our thyroid. So if you are a person that suffers from something, say like hypothyroidism, so that's when our thyroid doesn't produce enough thyroid hormone, typically T3, there's a huge correlation with thyroid conditions and adrenal fatigue, and they mask each other. So if you were to look online, adrenal fatigue symptoms and then low thyroid, very similar symptoms that we see in the body. So when we're not producing enough cortisol, it can then go to our thyroid and actually take from our thyroid hormone. So that can cause some low thyroid conditions. So definitely starts to kind of, trigger other reactions in our body. And from our thyroid, that can even affect our sex hormones. So when I'm talking about our sex hormones, first off, our sex hormones are steroid hormones, okay? So we actually create these hormones within our body through cholesterol in our body, okay? And this is not the bad cholesterol that I'm talking about. This is a good cholesterol. So we need a good amount of cholesterol, good cholesterol in our body to create our hormones. So when our cortisol is out of balance, if we are having under a lot of stress, and for women, what ends up happening, and I saw one of the questions is that can high stress and cortisol affect menopausal symptoms? 100%, and we're going to dive into that. What ends up happening is we don't create enough progesterone. So not only does our adrenal glands produce cortisol, but it also helps produce, it's a cofactor for producing progesterone and another little hormone called DHEA, which, ladies, this is our anti-stress hormone. So if we're not producing enough DHEA, we can actually find that we age. So how many of us look in the mirror when we're under a lot of stress and we're like, oh my gosh, like these kids are aging me? You know, how many times have we said that? We feel like we're aging faster because we're under stressful conditions, and we don't stop, we never sit down. So that's where it comes from, right? So we don't produce enough progesterone. So back to that menopause question that you ask is, when we go through menopause, and menopause is a full year without our menses, what ends up happening is our ovaries actually produce our estrogen. And we actually create 3 different types of estrogen in our body, but the main one that we talk about is estradiol. And so when we go into menopause, our ovaries just stop producing that estrogen. So our adrenal glands kick in, and they then start to produce that estrogen for us after our ovaries aren't doing it anymore. So if we have very fatigued adrenal glands, or we are very, very stressed, that's going to affect us again in menopause as well. And it can actually intensify our menopausal symptoms. And we'll talk more about what those are and what that can kind of look like. So for your question, one of the ladies that asked a question about that, yes, if you're under a lot more stress, you definitely could see, more onset symptoms of menopause, or even going into perimenopause sooner. So I kind of want to just, back up a little bit before we go into like diving into it, because I just want to get a feel for all of the viewers that are with me today, because I did a great chat yesterday, and what I wanted to ask you all and to see how you guys are all doing is, have you guys noticed a change in your hormones in the last 2 months? Because I have talked to a lot of women, and we've had conversations about this, and a lot of people have said, you know what, even if they say they don't really feel, and the thing is, when we're under a lot of stress, we adapt to it because our body's super cool. We start to adapt to it. The first week that we went into, isolation, how many of us were like, oh gosh, what's going on? How are we going to cope? How are we going to deal with this? Our anxiety was a little bit higher. Now we're 8 weeks in, and now we've figured out a routine. We have a system. We've got our Zoom meetings. We've got the kids sorted out with homeschooling. Things don't seem as hectic as they originally did, but that doesn't mean we're not feeling the effects of that in our body from the stress, right? We've just adapted to it. So that still is going to have those, they still are going to have that same stress, but we've just adapted. So right now, what you might be noticing, and I'm seeing a couple comments on here, is that you might be noticing that you're having some sleep disturbances, or, maybe you're having a few, strange dreams, or you're waking up in the middle of the night. How many of you have started having some weird, like, hot flashes? Or, your cycles have been different. You've gotten your periods earlier, or they've been later, or they've just been totally off. They're not how they usually are, maybe more cramping or bloating, or maybe you've had, some weird food cravings, or some anxiety attacks. So anxiety attacks is showing that we have a lot of cortisol, that we're not able to cope. And, remind me to, I'll teach you a breathing exercise to help with that, because I'm seeing a lot of people commenting here that they have a lot of anxiety. So I've got a great breathing exercise that helps reduce that. So how many of you guys are feeling that you're having these different kind of cycles, or, if you are in perimenopause, if you're noticing you're having a lot more hot flashes and sweats, and, just so you know, anxiety and irritability are all symptoms of, hormonal imbalances, or even perimenopause and menopausal. So these things can definitely be more intense right now because we're under some stress. So now more than ever, we really need to make sure that we're not just looking after our immunity and our overall health, but that we're also looking after our bodies and our hormones, both men and women. So just to touch lightly, a majority of women are watching this, but women, for your husbands or men in your lives, men also feel the effects of stress as well, because I always love to say this to my husband, but men have hormones. They might tell you they don't, but they do. They'll talk about testosterone, but they will not admit that they have estrogen, but they also do. So when they're under a lot of stress as well, they may show that their stress may manifest totally different than women. I feel like women are more emotional creatures, but they may have some imbalances as well. So stress affects us. So let's kind of slide into our sex hormones and get a kind of understanding of what imbalances can be, because leading up into this series for the next 3 weeks, we're really going to dive into what estrogen is. We're going to dive into progesterone, and then we're going to talk about hormonal imbalances and menopause and all the things that we can do naturally to help balance and help find balance within our body and balance our hormones and kind of get rid of these symptoms or relieve these symptoms that we may be feeling on a day-to-day basis. So estrogen, let's dive into estrogen first. So I want you guys to know that estrogen is our main sexual reproduction hormone. So without estrogen, we wouldn't have our breast development. It's kind of what kicks us into puberty. It's also very important for the first 2 weeks of our cycle. So estrogen's important for building up that lining in our uterus, so making our endometrium nice and thick and juicy. So for the first 2 weeks, our estrogen levels are higher, and then the last 2 weeks, our estrogen levels drop, and then our progesterone rises. So estrogen and progesterone work together. Let's just say they're like the BFFs of our sex hormones. They need to work together, just like cortisol and melatonin work together, right? So melatonin is our sleep hormone, and then cortisol is our stress hormone. So they work together. So when one's off, obviously they're all going to be off, right? So estrogen, like I said, is responsible for our breast development and creating that nice thick and juicy endometrial lining. So when we get our periods, basically what happens is we build up that tissue the first 2 weeks of our cycles, and then if we don't fertilize the egg in an implantation and we don't get pregnant, then we shed that lining. So that's a normal woman's menstruation cycle. So, estrogen drops and progesterone rises, and then progesterone will drop the last 2 weeks of our cycle if we don't get pregnant and we shed that. So what we are seeing that's more common now with imbalances, especially with high estrogen, is that we're getting an abundance of that, endometrium. So some people might notice that they're having heavier periods. They're having, painful periods. They're having, more clotting, or they have fibroids, or they might be getting things like endometriosis, polycystic breast disease. You might have a lot of breast cysts. You might be noticing a lot more irritability and more anxiety. You can be noticing a lot more weight gain and water retention. So when we have high amounts of estrogen, these are kind of the things that are going on in our body. So there are some contributing factors as how we can get high estrogen levels in our body. So that can be lifestyle. It could be through the foods that we eat, as well as it can be through stress, and it can be all the way down to our digestive health and our liver health, which is both really important. And I always, you'll hear me talk about this for the next 3 weeks, how important our digestive and our liver health is when it comes down to hormones. So some signs of having high estrogen, like I mentioned, weight gain. A lot of that time we see that weight gain, that high estrogen within like our hips and our thighs, and maybe, like our outer thighs or inner thighs, our hips, and even in our buttocks area. And and you might even notice that you're holding a lot more like cellulite in that area. So that's where estrogen likes to reside. So if we have excess estrogen in our body, we're going to notice that we put on a lot of our weight in that area. Where when we're talking about high amounts of cortisol, you might notice you have a little bit more of that belly fat because our cortisol receptors are there in our belly. So if we're holding on to some weight, this can be should be a sign of some hormonal imbalances. Okay, so definitely, some indicators there. And I do notice too, when people do have high estrogen or estrogen dominance is probably what you read about, that you do notice that you carry that weight in that area. So just to give you an idea, we make estrogen in 3 different areas of our body. About 80% of our estrogen is actually created in our ovaries. So as I mentioned before, if once we go into menopause, what ends up happening is the ovaries shut down the estrogen production, and then our adrenal glands have to kick in. We also, so that's in our adrenal glands, so our DHEA converts into our estrogen. And then we also create estrogen naturally through a good amount of healthy body fat. So really important to make sure that we are not too lean. For women, a lot of women who are very, very lean sometimes don't get their periods anymore because they're not creating enough estrogen because they have a very low body fat. So making sure that you have a good, healthy body fat percentage is important when we're talking about our estrogen production. So when we have too much estrogen, so like everything in our body, we have organs. When we get too much estrogen, whether it's through production or through the foods that we eat, lifestyle, even personal care products, we do have detoxifying organs that their job is to get rid of that excess, right? So our liver, that's where our liver comes into play to metabolize that excess estrogen, as well as our digestive tract. So what we want to do is we want to make sure those are functioning very well. So we want to have a good, healthy digestive tract, because ladies, what ends up happening is we need to actually poop out that extra estrogen, right? So that's our body's way of getting rid of things. And then also our liver detoxifies it. So if we have a sluggish digestive tract, so if you're having some digestive disorders, if you don't go to the washroom regularly, or if you have IBS or IBD or something like that, then you probably may notice that you're actually, you may have some imbalances there because you're not getting out those excess hormones. So have a look at your digestive health. And again, have a look at your liver health. How much are you supporting your liver health? If you're enjoying a couple glasses of wine a week, that can kind of work against us when we're, looking at our liver health. So I'm just going to take a minute because I see so many great questions coming through here, and I don't want to lose any of these while I'm going, but I'm seeing a lot of people that are asking how you can check your hormone levels that I see here. And I just want to make sure, so there is a really great, if you go with a naturopath, there is something called a Dutch test, and they can look at your hormonal levels for sure. You can ask your doctor, your medical doctor, to run a test on your hormones. Sometimes they might be a little reluctant if they don't feel like you're in the age bracket, especially when it comes down to your thyroid. I think every woman. So hypothyroidism is very, very common in women, especially the childbearing age. Generally, your doctor will run something called a TSH, so that's a thyroid stimulating hormone test. And it's actually, when it comes back, there's different ranges that doctors will be like, this is, it's within range. But I actually have hypothyroidism, and I actually went to my naturopath because my TSH, even though it was considered in the normal range in the medical, it actually was lower than it should. It was on the lower scale of it. And when we actually ran my T3, it showed that it was very, very low. So it didn't pick up on the TSH, but when I ran a T3, it did show that I had hypothyroidism. So sometimes, conventional medicine, like with the doctors, depending on your family doctor, you can ask to push for that, or you go straight into the naturopath's office and just, you pay for it, but you can get a Dutch test and you can do your thyroid hormone testing, as well as if you wanted to check your cortisol levels. So if you feel that you are under a lot of stress, or you have some, adrenal fatigue, you can do a saliva cortisol testing. So you spit into a little container throughout the day, and it checks your cortisol levels throughout the day, as well as they do a urine sample cortisol testing, which I believe is more accurate than the saliva testing kits. So naturopaths will all have those testing kits, but it's the Dutch kit and then the saliva ones. So great way to check your hormones, ladies, even if like some of these things that I'm talking to you about right now, about some signs and symptoms that are going on when we're talking about it. If you have questions, you can either, work with a naturopath, or even, reach out to some registered holistic nutritionist will they have the ability to order these testings, or can work with you in regards to hormonal imbalances. So definitely when we're coming, some of the things, and I see that people are talking about PCOS as well. So that is definitely a hormonal imbalance, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So a couple of the things, if you have been diagnosed with something through your doctor or your naturopath, things that you would be, like I said, fibrocystic breast disease, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. These can all be related to hormonal imbalances for sure. So whether it's an abundance of that, a high amount of that estrogen, or with PCOS, it's actually, you don't have enough, there's an imbalance of that estrogen progesterone, but you have a lot more of that testosterone and insulin resistance. So a lot of that is those imbalances. And remember, just like I said that men have estrogen, ladies, we have testosterone as well. So if we have too much cortisol, if we're under a lot of stress and we have too much cortisol, another thing that we can be doing is it can cause our estrogen and progesterone to be out of whack, but it also can cause our testosterone levels to kind of run rampant in our body. So you might even start to notice you have an increase in androgen. So facial hair. So if you're noticing you get, some stuff on your chin, some facial hair here, you might notice that you start to have it on your chest, around your nipples, more, hair growth. I can never say the word properly. I'm not even going to try right now because I know I'm not going to get it out right, but there is more male pattern hair growth on women, and that can be from higher levels of androgen. I'm going to work on that word for you guys next week, and from testosterone levels. So when we're talking about our hormones, you definitely can see the correlation between stress and our sex hormones. So lastly, I want to talk about progesterone, then I'll dive into some of these supplements that I recommend to help balance this, because lots of people are asking this. And then some things to look for, things that you can do naturally, whether it's through personal care products and the foods that we eat. So progesterone, guys, so I want you to remember that estrogen is one of our main sex hormones for reproduction and breast health. It's also, I like you guys to kind of remember, as like our va-va-voom hormone. Okay, so our estrogen has got many jobs in our body, but it's one that, juices up everything in our endometrium and gets everything ready. Progesterone is our chill hormone. So progesterone, the last 2 weeks of our cycle, that's where we're supposed to be feeling relaxed, and we're not supposed to be having a lot of anxiety or, feelings of discontent. So if you notice a lot of anxiety or irritability before your periods, then that might show that you actually you don't have a lot of progesterone. You might have an imbalance in that progesterone. You're not producing enough of that progesterone. So definitely something to look at as well. So if you're noticing that you're not really chilled out and, you have a lot more anxiety, that definitely can be an imbalance with your estrogen, or so your progesterone, as well as your cortisol. So progesterone works together, like I mentioned. Its job is to kind of thicken up that endometrium once we have, fertilization of our egg, and hold the pregnancy there. So it holds the egg. That's important for maintaining our pregnancy, okay? And then if we don't get pregnant, then we shed it and progesterone drops, and then we wait again another cycle. So that happened 12 times a year. So progesterone is important for that. But if we have imbalances, if you're trying to get pregnant or have, infertility issues, it can be related to the imbalance of estrogen and progesterone. So both very, very important hormones. And when we're looking at things, when we're talking about perimenopause, you guys, generally what happens is we have too much estrogen, which kicks down, it drops our progesterone levels, and that can kick us into perimenopause. So for some of you guys that don't know what perimenopause is when we start to kind of notice imbalances in our periods. They start becoming shorter, irregular, so we might not get it a month. We might start to notice that we're having some of these menopausal symptoms. So you might have an occasional hot flash, or you might sweat the bed. If anybody out there has sweat the bed, throw a heart up there, because we all if you've had one, you've experienced it, you know what it's like. This is a great question. At what age does this start? So women used to kind of kick into perimenopause usually in their mid-40s. Now, what I want you guys to remember is that we are all uniquely different. And things have changed over the last few years. So a couple, let's say about 20 years ago, women were going into perimenopause and menopausal at later ages. But with all these hormonal imbalances and all this estrogen dominance and all these kind of things that are going on in stress, women are kicking off into perimenopause as young as, say, like 36, 37. I've been working with clients. So starting to have these symptoms. This can continue on for at least a few years before they go full on into menopause. So you could have perimenopausal symptoms for a couple years, and then all of a sudden, your periods disappear. So menopause is a complete year without your period. And perimenopause is kind of that irregularity. So there are products that I'll talk about tonight and over the next few weeks of what these things can look like and how you can help support and balance and even kind of hopefully, prevent us going into this, because I'm seeing a lot of comments here about, thyroid health and perimenopause. These all can be related. So if you have adrenal fatigue and you notice that you're having some thyroid conditions, hypothyroidism, you definitely will have some imbalances in your sex hormones, because when one's out, they're all out. So we have to get everything kind of balanced together. So one of the questions I see here is, could hormone imbalances cause a thyroid to enlarge? So I really wanted to bring this up, because if you're noticing that you have an enlargement here, then you definitely need to go and get your thyroid tested. So some of the signs that we can get if you are noticing like you have more thickness here, it's sticking out more and you've never been tested for your thyroid, I definitely go get that, because what happens is sometimes with hypothyroidism, we can get goiters and we can get enlarged thyroids, and that can be one of the signs of hypothyroidism or other thyroid conditions like Hashimoto's or thyroiditis. So definitely if you're noticing some enlargement there, I would go and see your doctor and get that tested. And yes, when hormone is out, they can all be out. So if you have other imbalances in your body, I really recommend getting all your levels checked for sure when it comes down to your hormones. So lastly, because we've talked about estrogen and progesterone, we talked about cortisol. Lastly, I just want to talk about, some of the ways that our hormones can be affected, and then I'll talk about the supplements, and then we'll jump into what we're going to talk about next week and pick a winner. So there's been so many great comments here. So thank you guys. I want to talk about the foods that we eat. So really important the foods that we eat play a role. So how many of you guys remember a couple years ago when we look at the plastics, we make sure that there's no BPA in there. So plastics was a contributor for like the xenoestrogen. So everything that we put on our skin and we ingest, that can have effect on our health. Okay. So foods, when we're talking about foods, we want to make sure that we are eating as organic as possible. So herbicides and pesticides can cause inflammation in our body, and they can act as endocrine disruptors. We want to make sure that if we're eating protein sources, that they're not filled with, if we're eating, say chicken and stuff, then they're not pumped full. Obviously they're not used with antibiotics or hormones. Because if we're eating foods that say like even dairy cows are pumped full of hormones, and then what ends up happening is that we ingest that. So we want to make sure that we're eating as clean as possible with the foods that they're not they're not hormones, they don't have antibiotics, and that they're not causing more hormones in our body, excess estrogen. So things like soy's in everything. If you eat a ton of soy, try to make sure you're eating organic, so it's not, genetically modified. But try not to eat too much, because soy can act as a phytoestrogen in our body. So basically what it does is it mimics our estrogen in our body, and then we get an abundance of it. So really watch your soy intake. Make sure you're eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables. So this is cruciferous vegetables contain something called DIM and I3C, and this helps metabolize the excess estrogen. So it breaks down that excess estrogen. So if you can eat our cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, all of those guys, make sure you're eating them at least one a day. It definitely helps to break them down. And I actually even notice if I eat a lot of that, I even can notice a little bit of, weight loss, because I actually store all my weight in my lower body as well. So I definitely make sure that I get enough of my broccoli and my cauliflower. Now you can have cauliflower any way you want. You can even put it in pizza. So those are really good. Omega-3 fatty acids is also really important. So make sure you're eating enough of omega-3 fatty acids in salmon, rich foods. Sorry, that's my family in the background. I apologize. So make sure that you are, eating omega-3 rich fatty acids foods. Flax seeds are really great, so you can do some seed cycling, salmon, those kind of things to help, naturally balance out your hormones as well. And then let's talk about cosmetics, because I think that's really important as well. So we absorb 80% of the things that we put on our body. And there are certain things in personal care products and laundry detergents and those kind of things that act as endocrine disruptors. So that increases our estrogen in our body. So make sure that you're not using products that contain parabens, fragrances, like unnatural fragrances, formaldehyde. Really watch for SLSs and dioxins. So there's a whole bunch of different things, that can be in our personal care products that can kind of cause havoc. And we all know about the deodorant thing, and so we want to make sure that we're really monitoring that so that we're not getting that excess estrogen. A lot of it is lifestyle and the foods we eat, and even with other hormones, like I said, like stress and things can cause imbalances throughout our entire body. So let's dive into some supplements to help balance those hormones. So I've seen a lot of questions about how you can naturally balance. So we talked about some foods, and I'll talk more about that throughout the next 3 weeks as well. And we've talked about personal care products, but when it comes down to supplementing for our bodies, I'm going to start with our adrenal health. So has anybody out there heard of an adrenal support when it comes to helping with adrenal fatigue? Is anybody out there currently right now taking something to support their adrenal health? So just throw up a heart and put it in a comment there. But I think it's really, really important. So basically how an adrenal support works in their body is it helps our adrenal glands adapt to the stress. So it kind of just takes the edge off our adrenal glands, kind of helps them out a little bit. So some things that you could look at when we're talking about adrenal supports is anything that contains something with ashwagandha or rhodiola. You want to make sure you're taking a good vitamin B complex. So our adrenal glands need a good vitamin B. You want to make sure that you're, like I said, omega-3, 6, 9s. You want to make sure you're taking vitamin D3, there's tinctures and different adrenal supports out there, depending on your levels of adrenal or your stress levels, or ones that actually have desiccated glands in them, so they can actually help regenerate your adrenal glands. I know Nature's Fair has a great selection of a variety of adrenal supports, and everybody in there will probably be able to help you choose one that is based upon your, the things that are going on. So I definitely recommend looking after your adrenal glands when it comes to our hormones. Next, when it comes to our sex hormones, more specifically hormonal imbalances between estrogen and progesterone, you want to get a product kind of like this one, so something like Balance, okay? So Harmony Balance contains a couple different herbs, and the way this is actually, Harmony was formulated by a traditional Chinese medicine doctor and herbalist, and it's actually from Australia. It's been on the market for over 30 years, and it was designed for women and women's health conditions. So Harmony is the first product out there that's designed just for menopausal symptoms. So you'll see that this is menopause. So if you have questions about, menopausal symptoms, or if you're going into perimenopause or menopause, please shoot me a question, and we're going to talk so much more about that over the next 3 weeks as well. But Balance is for hormonal imbalances like we talked about. So if you suffer from PCOS or endometriosis or fibrocystic breast disease or irregular periods, bloating, cramping, irritability, weight gain, heavy periods, clotting, fibroids, if any of these kind of things are happening in your life consistently, or you have been, over the last few years, or, if you've ever been put on the birth control pill to kind of do acne, those kind of things that have anything to do with your period, then maybe going on something like a hormone balancing supplement will help. So there are a variety of herbs in here that work synergistically together. So it contains things like chast tree, which is Vitex. So how many of you guys have heard of Vitex? So Vitex, what it does, it actually balances out that progesterone and estrogen within our body. So guys, you need to take this consistently every day. And generally within 1 to 2 cycles, you might start to notice that your periods will kind of normalize. And I don't really like to, say normalize, but everybody's cycles, like if you don't track your cycles, I really encourage you to do that. If you have some questions about your hormonal health, start tracking your cycles. Start seeing how consistent your cycles are. So do your cycles come every 21 days? Do they come every 28 to 32 days? Do you, how often do you bleed? Are your periods from 2 to 5 days or 5 to 7 days? So start to track all of those things. That's a great question. I'm going to get to that one in just one sec. So I'm noticing some of you guys have some great questions. Start to track your periods so that you get an idea. And then, start to write down signs signs and symptoms. Like, do you notice you get irritable the week before? Do you notice you have certain food cravings? And I guarantee you guys all now, because we've had this conversation tonight, you guys are going to be like, okay, I remember this. Like when you get your next cycle, you'll be like, oh, she was talking about this. Oh yeah, right. So it's really important. It's really good to be in touch with our body and kind of understand what's going on, because sometimes we live with the same things every month. I've worked with women who are like, oh, I've had, I can't go out of the house for 2 days because I have a very heavy period, and I get hot water bottle and I'm curled up in bed and I'm not feeling good and I can't eat because, I've just always been like that. Well, that's not normal. That's not normal, but that's normal to her because that's how she's been living. So Vitex helps balance out that progesterone and that estrogen naturally. It's not putting in a synthetic hormone. It's not altering. It's just help balancing that out. There's also other herbs in balance that actually help. I'm just moving this so that you guys can see me better. There's other herbs in here that help with this. So there's actually peony that will help balance out our estrogen, progesterone, just like the flower, as well as buplarome. So that actually helps reduce the anxiety and that stress that we feel on a day-to-day basis. So if you're noticing a lot of these things, then you definitely taking a balancing supplement like Harmony Balance will help. And Dong Quai. So Dong Quai has actually, you probably have heard a lot of it for menopausal products as well. But again, it helps balance out that estrogen, progesterone, and it naturally has that vitamin D3 and vitamin B6. So this is a great product if you are looking to naturally balance your hormones or you have some hormonal conditions. Okay. And this is one of the products that we're giving away tonight. So I want to jump in here because there's some great questions. And I think I might just leave it here and answer some questions and anything you guys have here. Otherwise I will spill all the beans before the next 3 weeks because I can talk about this all day. So I'm just going to scroll back, ladies, and don't forget, make sure you throw your hearts out there to have you're entered to win a chance. So one of the questions that I have here, guys, is would a detox help? So great question. So you know how I talked about we needed to have optimal digestive health, and we also need to have a really happy, let's have a happy liver. So I'm not a huge, and everybody's different, but I'm not a huge person to say go on like this crazy detox, because if you've ever done a detox, and especially, depending on the kind of detox you're doing, sometimes they can be really harsh on our body. So my recommendation is if you want to naturally detoxify your body is really remove foods that you know aren't great. So remove those, processed foods, reduce our sugar, really watch our gluten consumption. Make sure that we're giving our liver TLC. So cut the Pinot Noir, cut the wine out for a little bit, because wine actually, wine can actually interfere, our alcohol with our liver health. So we want to make sure that, we want to give our liver some TLC. So taking something like milk thistle every day in a tincture form, or some kind of antioxidant that has some milk thistle in it, or drinking dandelion root leaf tea every day. I know traditional medicine, I believe they have their teas. They have a daily detox that's great. It's got burdock and dandelion leaf and root. So these all help tone and regenerate our liver. So it gives our liver a little TLC. So I more prefer just kind of removing those foods that we know we shouldn't be eating, really cleaning up, get lots of dark leafy greens and vegetables, make sure you're eating a lot of those cruciferous vegetables, make sure you're eating enough protein, because protein is essential in our stage 2 detoxification process in our body. So we want to make sure that we're getting that good enough protein, and then we're eating a lot of, nutrient dense foods while supporting our liver health. So it really does help with, balancing our hormones and getting rid of that excess estrogen or excess hormones. Also, ladies, as I mentioned before, you need to have a great digestive tract. So if you're not going to the bathroom, you're not getting out all those toxins and those bacteria and that excess estrogen. And you probably aren't actually absorbing the foods that you're eating. So if you have some digestive disturbances going on, or you know that you don't have a great digestive tract, you really want to look at that, because you need to absorb your foods that you're eating. And a great way that you can do it, sorry, that's my husband just sneaking in here. A great way that you can do that is make sure you're taking a quality probiotic, removing those inflammatory foods, being very mindful when you're eating. Don't drink a lot of, fluids while you're eating. So really track that as well. So there are a couple of ways that you can kind of, help yourself when we're talking about our liver health and our digestive tract and balancing those hormones. So I'm just going to go through here for a couple more, questions here. So there is a question here. Could you make a suggestion health-wise for pregnant women? So I'm going to assume that you're talking more specifically about stress levels and sleep and maybe some anxiety, because obviously we're not going to be talking about hormone balancing. But a great thing that you can, for everybody to take, especially if you don't already, is magnesium biglycinate. Magnesium biglycinate is magnesium is our anti-stress mineral, and it's actually the most depleted mineral in our soil today. So even if you eat 100% organic, it's just we're not getting the same amount that we used to. So I believe a lot of us walk around in magnesium deficiency. So if you notice you get a lot of migraines or headaches or a lot of, muscle cramping, if you're having a hard time falling asleep at night, magnesium biglycinate works very, very well at helping us have a restful sleep. It's a smooth muscle contractant. So if you find that you're constipated, that even can help with that. So taking a good magnesium supplement is great for helping us calm, and it is safe. So just mention it to your healthcare practitioner that you want to look at taking magnesium, especially while pregnant. But you also can take a post with breastfeeding. But I always tell people before you start taking a supplement, and if you are pregnant, make sure you run it by your healthcare practitioner beforehand. So there's lots of great, one of these questions here was, can any of these interfere with antidepressants? Great question. So there is, when it comes down to taking herbs and things like that, we want to make sure that, they don't interfere with our antidepressants, SSRIs. But there are some out there that can. These actually don't contain anything that do. So things like that would be like valerian root and stuff like that. You just want to make sure that you speak with your healthcare practitioner if you're taking antidepressant and it has things like valerian root and St. John's wort. So just make sure. But neither of our products contain that, especially the hormone balancing. So great question. Great person to ask before you start to use supplements when you're on medication is just even your pharmacist. So they always can check the herb interactions with your pharmaceuticals. So these are all so many great questions. Anything for full-blown menopause, no periods for 3 years. So if you are suffering through, hopefully you guys are still okay for time, you don't mind me doing this. So if you are in menopause, a lot of the times, so when people think they go into menopause, okay, your cycles are gone, that's it. But then you start to have, the hot flashes or the night sweats, or a lot of the time is a lot of anxiety or a lot of insomnia. So it depends on what stage you're at. So the great thing about Harmony and the products that they've created is it is designed to, the herbs that they've put together in these products are designed to reduce the symptoms that you're experiencing. So they have a variety. So I talked about balance, but they have the menopause line. So there's 3 different boxes if you were to look on shelf. This one is actually the Harmony Menopause Day and Night. So this is actually a daytime formula, and then there's a nighttime formula. So a lot of the times, depending on where you are, so there's Harmony Menopause. So that's kind of for people who have just kind of gone into menopause. They're having a lot more of those hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, not anything that's too crazy. They're just kind of bothering, you, but you can kind of get through the day. That's what the blue box just menopause is. Menopause max is for the maxed out woman. You're maxed out with your symptoms. You're getting hot flashes all the time. You're sweating the bed. You're irritable. Like you're just not having a good time. That dark blue box that says max, that one is for you. Day and night is a combination of the Harmony just menopause. So daytime, so you kind of get a little bit of those hot flashes. Balance helps it. They contain the herbs like peony, and they contain like Vitex, all those kind of things to help balance out, your hormones, to help you go through this. But it also contains something, and this is what sets Harmony apart from other menopausal products. It has something called Rehmannia in it. Rehmannia is a herb that actually reduces the heat from the body. So one of the major symptoms that people go through when they're in menopause is those hot flashes and the night sweats. Drives people crazy. So Rehmannia actually comes in and actually removes the heat from the body. So if you suffer from that, that's your main symptom. And I tell people all the time when they go into the store, tell the person at the store if you have questions about the products, whatever your symptoms are, that is how you choose the product. Whatever's driving you crazy and that you want relief from, that is where you grab the box that, whatever herb is on there that you need to relieve that symptom. So Day and Night and Harmony Max is what, would be really beneficial if you're experiencing those hot flashes and those night sweats. And actually the Day and Night contains something called Ziphilus. That's a nighttime sleep aid. So it's not going to make you feel groggy in the morning, and it's not going to, it's not a sleeping pill. It just helps you relax so you can get a restful sleep. So a lot of great products there. So I'm just going to keep going. Yes, Vitex definitely can help older women. It's safe for all ages. It helps balance out that estrogen progesterone. And sometimes we are symptomatic for a while. So some people will go into menopause and then they don't have any signs or symptoms. They feel like, okay, I'm over the hump. And then like times like right now, we're under a lot of stress. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I've had a hot flash. Or, oh, I sweat the bed. Or, oh, I'm getting a little they can come back. Like our hormones are always there. Our body still is producing this kind of stuff. We're still going through it. So depending on our lifestyle and our stress, these things can be even more so, right? So don't be surprised, especially right now, if things are off balance, because we are going through a lot and we're under a lot of stress. And like I said, I want you to remember is when one hormone is out, they can all be out because they are all out of balance. So I have a lot of questions here, but I think it's probably time that we choose, we choose a winner if everybody's okay with that, and then we can jump in next week. Next week we are going to talk about beautiful glowing skin and how our hormones affect that and how we can look after our skin as women. And then the following week, we're going to talk about hormonal imbalances. And then we're going to have a webinar at the end of it all, tying it all together. So I look forward to spending these Wednesdays with you guys. I hope you guys tune in next week, and happy to answer some more of these questions. I'm going to let, some of these comments are so great, guys. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me. This is wonderful. I'm just going to make sure I haven't missed any. Okay, yes, they were going to pick the winner. So yes, please pick the winner. Woohoo! And thank you guys. And they'll let me know the winner so I can see. So many hearts. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. I'm so excited that you all joined in. You're welcome. You're welcome. And yeah, these are the products if you guys have questions. Yes, Harmony Max works fantastic. You're welcome, you guys. Thank you. I think I'm just waiting for them to pick the winner. Did you pick it? Oh, this is a good, can you take both of them together? I'm assuming if you're talking about the Harmony products, I just want to make sure if you're talking about the Harmony products, you want to make sure that you're just taking balance or you're taking the menopause, but you can take it with an adrenal support. So yay! Shelly Mitchell won. Awesome. Congratulations. Thank you guys for doing that for me. This is very exciting. So Shelly, you're just going to send a message to Nature's Fair. I'm sure they're going to let you know. And you get your choice between Harmony Balance, or if you were interested in the Harmony Menopause line, then you can just let them know if you want the Menopause or Menopause Max or the Day and Night, and you'll just send them the information and they will send you the product. So thank you guys all so much for spending the evening with me. I will see you guys next Wednesday as we talk about beautiful glowing skin and our hormones, and I look forward to spending these Wednesdays with you. Thank you. Bye.